I'm sure we're all agreed that reading is fantastic, and being a reader is an amazing experience, and it kind of, I think, gives life much more purpose. I know that sounds strange, but I can't imagine not having reading in my life. That's what I do, that's what I look forward to. If I didn't have reading, I would just feel flat and empty. However, today I thought I would talk about books in a slightly less positive light and talk about my bookish peeves. I've picked out a few things that really irritate me. Some of these are about the way people react towards me being a readerly person, and some of these are things that really irritate me in books themselves, but it's kind of just a mix of all my bookish peeves, which I thought I would put out there for you lovely people, because you know, everything has a downside. So, number one, I cannot stand it when somebody asks me for my favourite book. I think favourite books are a really funny thing, and I actually think they're more something that people who don't read as much will have. But I think for people who read a lot, a favourite book isn't really a thing. I have my standard go-to answers, but if I'm completely honest, my favourite books are probably about 10 books, and really they change all the time, because at the end of the day I generally only read books once. I very rarely go back to books, so I kind of feel as though saying I've got a favourite book is a bit of a lie, because if I've only read a book once, how can it be a favourite? I wouldn't listen to a song once and say that that was my favourite song of all time. But I do have go-to answers. If Nobody Speaks of Remarkable Things is always up there, as are Grapes of Wrath and The Heart is a Lonely Hunter. But I definitely think that a favourite book is just such an annoying question, and also as soon as somebody asks that, your mind just goes blank and it's just a big blur of all the books you've read. And I don't believe in favourite books. It's not fair. It's just not an accurate representation of my reading, really. Number two, I hate it when new people come into my life and they see my books, and I've got quite an extensive library. But to be honest, about 70% of that is unread, because generally, unless I know that I'm going to revisit a book, I will give it away after I've read it, just because, you know, there's not that much shelf space in the world, and I like to have a library to pick from every time I come to read my next book. I think if I just had one book in my to-be-read pile, or one little pile of books that I could choose from, I think it would just stifle me, and also I think it would probably create a bit of a reading block, because I like to have that choice. I need that choice. So it really irritates me when new people come into my life, look at my shelves and assume that I am a poser reader because I have not read most of the books. So they'll go through and they'll be like, have you read this one? Have you read this one? Have you read this one? Well, why have you got them all then? Well, people, a library is a collection of books that I have not yet read. If I had a collection of books that I've read, what would be the point? My library is a library. It's a selection of books that I can choose from when I need to pick my next book. You wouldn't go into a library full of books you've read, would you? No. No. Number three, I hate it when partners or people who you spend a lot of time with complain about the fact that you read a lot. Now, I'm not going to lie, my reading is a little bit of an addiction, and it's an obsession, because it is what I do to relax. If I don't read at least a few pages a day, I get very anxious and antsy and just moody. But I find that people have a real problem, especially in the past I've had partners who have actually had full-blown arguments with me because they hate the fact that I sit there and I read. But for me, I don't watch television. I would really not see the point in picking a programme just for the sake of having something on, when there are books to be read. And the fact that I'm reading my book doesn't mean that I'm not enjoying your company. It just, that's what I do and I need it. It's like my lifeblood. Now we're on to the things that annoy me about books themselves. So number four, I hate it when a character's thoughts are written in italics. I've had this with a book I read recently, and I end up just skipping those bits because I think it's such a clumsy writing method, and it very much takes you out of the story. It takes you out of the character's thoughts, even though the whole point is that you're getting in their head. But it's cheap and it's lazy, and I just can't stand it. So if there are little thought bits in italics, I will just skip over them and try to pretend that they're not there. I think it's ridiculous. Number five, I hate unrealistic speech in books. I think speech is one of those things that a lot of writers struggle with, because it's quite a strange thing to capture. We don't speak the way that we assume that we speak. So for a writer to really capture speech in a realistic way, they need to actually listen to the nuances and also understand that if you did write down word for word how we speak, that also wouldn't work. So it's finding that happy medium between speech that's readable but that's also realistic, and I think it's really difficult, and it's probably something that even I haven't got right. However, I hate really unrealistic speech in writing, and I also hate speech where the characters try to tell each other things that have happened that they should already know, like the whole, you remember when we did that thing yesterday and that thing happened? No. And number 6, my last point, I hate it when there is drama for the sake of it. I find this a lot of times in long-winded series, which is why I try to avoid reading series now. Especially I found in the Song of Ice and Fire series, a lot of the time the books, there's no need for that many books in one series. If there are 7 books in a series, that's just too much from the off. But also I find that a lot of those books are kind of bridge books, and for the sake of having something interesting happen in them, a character will die, for example, and then probably be brought back to life. Now, I do not respect that writing choice. I think if you have to kill a main character temporarily to make a book interesting, it's worth looking at whether that book is actually worth writing in the first place. Sorry, but it just irritates me, and I think it really stands out like a sore thumb. I don't know whether that's because I write so I know how it feels when you just want something to happen so you can get going again, but it just irritates me. And as I say, if you're having to do that, it might be worth thinking about why you're having to do that, because there's just no need for it. So those are my 6 pet peeves. I could only think of 6. I would have liked to make it a 5 or 10, but you know, we're going for 6 because that's the amount that I could come up with. Please let me know down below your bookish peeves. I'm sure I'm not the only one who has got a few bookish annoyances, because you know, as I said at the start, nothing is perfect, not even books. So that's all for today, and I'll see you next time. Bye!